It's night before exam and you don't have time to read regulation of respiration entire topic. Let's revise it in 5 minutes. Respiration control can be achieved by two mechanisms. One is automatic involuntary mechanism, which is executed by brainstem, that is the medulla and pons, whereas voluntary conscious mechanism is done by cerebral cortex. Now this automatic mechanism and voluntary mechanism, which is required for talking, singing, swimming, and breath holding, both are executed by their effect on the effector organ. In this case, the effector organ is the respiratory muscle, that is a diaphragm and internal intercostal muscle. Remember, one applied aspect we'll see in the last about the Ondine curves, that is a loss of automatic control, that is bulbar polio or medullary compression. In this, the patient has to remember to take a breath to stay alive. After introduction, the next very important part of the answer is this diagram of respiratory centers. The regulatory centers are present in medulla and pons. The one which are present in medulla are dorsal respiratory group and ventral respiratory group. The pacemaker which is present in the medulla is called as pre-Botzinger complex, which is present between nucleus ambiguous and lateral reticular nucleus. The other two areas which are present in a pons are Apneustic Center in the lower pons and Pneumotaxic Center in the upper pons. Now, this table shows the basic difference between dorsal and ventral respiratory group of neurons. Dorsal respiratory group of neurons having only inspiratory neurons, whereas ventral contains inspiratory as well as expiratory neurons. DRG, the function is maintaining the basic rhythm that is important for quiet breathing, eupnea, whereas the ventral respiratory group of neurons play important role in forceful respiration required for during exercise and high ventilation. Dorsal respiratory group of neurons supply mainly the muscles of inspiration, that is diaphragm and external intercostal muscles, whereas the ventral supply mainly the muscles of expiration, internal intercostal muscles and abdominal muscles. Remember, this DRG and VRG, both of them show the reciprocal innervation. That is, they both inhibit each other. That's why we can't inhale as well as exhale at the same time. This dorsal respiratory group of neurons in medulla show two characteristics. First one is the inspiratory ramp signal and second one is the off switch circuit. Inspiratory ramp signal. As you can see from the diagram, this signal is slowly rising for 2 seconds resulting in ramp-like signal. Now this is responsible for steady filling of the lungs and no gasping. So this ultimately leads in 2 seconds in and 3 seconds out, that is expiration. Another characteristic is off switch circuit. This goes like inspiratory neurons stimulate integrated neurons, which in turn stimulate the inspiratory off switch neurons. And this inspiratory off switch neuron turn off in feedback I neurons. This allows the elastic recoil for expiration. The two regulatory centers which are present in a pons, that is Apneustic Center and Pneumotaxic Center, acts like a fine tuners. Remember, the Pneumotaxic Center acts like a brake and Apneustic Center acts like an accelerator. That's a Pneumotaxic Center always inhibit the Apneustic Center and thus it shortens the inspiration and increases the rate of respiration. Whereas the Apneustic Center, it acts like an accelerator, it prevents the inspiratory off switch neurons and always promote long deep inspiration, that is apnesis. Thus, this Pneumotaxic Center controls the depth as well as the rate of the respiration by keeping this Apneustic Center in check. After neural regulation of respiration, let's see two important reflex. First one is the Herring-Brewer reflex. This is the stretch reflex. It is mainly triggered by lung inflation, that is more than 1.5 liters. Action is this inflation inhibits the phrenic motor neuron via vagus nerve and ultimately it results in stopping of overinflation. This receptor is important in infants but it is weak in adults. Along with this Herring-Brewer reflex, there is another receptor that is called a J receptor, juxtapulmonary receptor. This is mainly triggered by pulmonary congestion, edema or microembolism. That is whenever they rise in fluid in interstitial space. The action is it causes apnea followed by tachypnea. These J receptors causes rapid shallow breathing, bradycardia and hypotension. Remember, these J receptors are mainly discovered by A.S. Spencer, Indian scientist, in 1954. So let's revise all actions finally. The medullary centers present in dorsal and ventral respiratory group of neurons act via spinal motor neurons, that is through phrenic and intercostal nerves on the respiratory muscles, and it causes ventilation. Now these dorsal and ventral respiratory group of neurons are modulated by various other centers and other areas like Pneumotaxic Center and Apneustic Center in pons, higher centers like cerebral cortex and limbic cortex. They are also inhibited by chemoreceptors and non-chemical receptors like stretch receptor, J receptors and certain irritant receptors. Finally, we are going to write about the applied aspect. After Honda and curves, we are going to write about the brain transaction proof. So if we take a cut above the pons, the basic rhythm remains intact. If we take a cut section between mid-pon, that is between Pneumotaxic and Apneustic Center, along with the vagotomy, there is a removal of pneumotaxic and vagus inhibition and it leads to apneusis. And if we take a cut section between medulla and spinal cord, total complete breathing stops. This shows the significance of this respiratory medullary centers. Now finally, let's see some important terms for exam purpose. Pre-Bodzinger, it is the main pacemaker for regulation. Dorsal respiratory group of neurons is responsible for inhalation, that is for basic rhythm, whereas the ventral respiratory group of neurons execute inhalation as well as exhalation. Pneumotaxic center, it mainly inhibits the apneustic center. It acts like a brake, whereas apneustic center, A for accelerator. It acts like an accelerator. It prolongs breaths and causes apneusis. Herring-Brewer reflex, it is a stretch reflex and it prevents the overinflation. Whereas the J receptor, it identifies mainly fluid or congestion in the lungs. Remember this name of the scientist A.S. Pentel who discovered it. And finally, there are two important protective reflex, cough and sneeze reflex. Now please go and watch this first video showing how to write the 10 marks university answer for neural regulation of respiration, and the second video showing the flowchart and diagram trick to remember this concept easily. Thank you.